Approximately 70% of adults will experience a traumatic incident in their lifetime. That's probably surprising to hear. Now, to the 70% who are involved in a traumatic incident, roughly 1/3 of those people will end up struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. And for first responders, such as police, paramedics, or military personnel, it's not a matter of if you're going to experience a traumatic event, but when and how often. So to start, it's important to define what is a traumatic incident. A traumatic incident is an event that can cause physical, emotional, spiritual, or psychological harm. And for an event to qualify as traumatic, the person involved in the incident would need to experience strong feelings of distress related to a threat or perceived threat towards himself or somebody else. Examples of traumatic events include domestic, family, or dating violence, community violence, such as bullying, assault, or burglary, sexual or physical abuse, a natural disaster, such as a fire or tornado, a serious car accident, a sudden unexpected death of someone close to you, a serious workplace accident, a serious injury, such as being burned or being attacked by a dog, human trafficking, major surgery or life-threatening illness, and war, political violence. Unfortunately, there are many types of traumatic incidents that can occur, and if you happen to be involved in a stressing event, what you do to cope immediately after experiencing the incident is particularly important. So today, I'm going to talk about a 5-step plan to help prevent a traumatic incident from turning into PTSD. For my first step, it's important to do something cognitively demanding after being involved in a traumatic incident, if at all possible. Now, this strategy bucks conventional wisdom, as it was previously thought it's important to talk about the incident right away. In a 2017 study by Dr. Lalitha Liader and colleagues, they had participants complete cognitive tasks such as counting, doing puzzles, or playing the computer game Tetris within 6 hours of being involved in a serious car accident. Now, for anyone unfamiliar with Tetris, this game involves stacking tiles with the goal of not leaving any spaces or gaps. Results from the study showed that people who played the game Tetris had 62% fewer traumatic memories when interviewed a week later, when compared with people who did puzzles, counted, or simply did nothing at all. So you're probably wondering why Tetris helped. Well, I suspect there's nothing particularly special about Tetris except for the fact that it's a cognitively demanding game that requires speed and focus. This appears to be critical, as researchers have theorized that participating in a demanding task after the car accident interfered with how bad memories were stored in long-term memory. They also found that there's a roughly 6-hour window of opportunity where engaging in a demanding task, as opposed to focusing on the traumatic incident, can help to decrease the impact of traumatic memories. So if you have the misfortune of being involved in a traumatic incident, I encourage you to engage in a demanding cognitive task, such as playing a computer game, within the first 6 hours after the incident. For my second step, I encourage you to use mindfulness. This is a very versatile strategy that's gained a lot of attention in the scientific literature. It's been shown to be effective in helping people cope after being involved in a traumatic event. There's also research to show that using mindfulness can help to minimize the psychological impact of being involved in a traumatic event. Or said another way, it can be used as a preventative strategy. In a 2019 study by Dr. Gunasevic and colleagues, they studied participants completing an 8-week course in mindfulness before being exposed to a fearful memory. Results showed that mindfulness can help to minimize the effect of fearful memories. In a particular interest, the researchers found that using mindfulness helped to change the way the brain processes fearful memories. Being mindful also helped the study participants to improve their ability to recall what it feels like being safe, which may usually cope with the fear. However, having said all of this, there are situations with trauma where using mindfulness can potentially be harmful unless modified. For trauma sufferers with severe symptoms or who experience difficulties with dissociation or feedbacks, engaging in mindfulness with eyes closed and allowing whatever thoughts you experience to come to mind can feel overwhelming and increase feelings of anxiety. So even though the goal of this video is to use mindfulness as a preventative strategy, when I go through the 4 main steps that are needed to be able to utilize mindfulness, I'm going to talk about some of the key modifications that can be made to help a trauma sufferer feel more in control, just in case there's someone who's watching the video that's already happens to be struggling with trauma and they'd like to use mindfulness as a helpful strategy. So for the first step, support that your body is in a relaxed position. Doesn't matter if you're sitting, standing, or moving, but you need to be comfortable. And for anyone struggling with severe trauma symptoms, it'd be wise to keep your eyes open and utilize the use of exteroceptors. Now, for anybody wondering what exteroceptors are, It essentially means utilizing receptors that access senses such as sight or touch. So in this case, being able to see creates a greater feeling of control. It might also be a good idea to utilize movement with a focus on touch, such as feeling your feet grip the ground or moving a stone between your thumb and forefingers to help ground you in the moment. Second, focus on taking slower, deeper breaths from your stomach. This doesn't need to be over-exaggerated in any way, but the goal is simply to take full, relaxed breaths. Third, you need something to focus your attention on. It could be your breathing, a picture on a wall, if you're sitting, or even focusing on treetops if you're outside walking. For the trauma sufferer with severe symptoms, it's important to use extra receptors once again to help ground you in the moment, with heavy touch likely being the best strategy if there's a strong possibility of dissociating or feeling overwhelmed. Fourth, you want to allow thoughts to come naturally, but the goal is not to engage or judge them in any way. Instead, you want to treat your thoughts as thought bubbles that are just floating by that you don't need to bother with for a little while. And once again, with heavy trauma sufferers, allowing thoughts to flow freely may feel too vulnerable. If that's the case, be wise to have a grounding word or phrase that you can utilize that creates a feeling of safety. It also suggests starting by allowing thoughts to flow freely for very short periods of time, at least initially, and then stretching them out for progressively longer periods of time so you can feel increasingly comfortable. So I encourage you to make mindfulness a part of your daily routine, starting with as little as 5 minutes a day. There are studies that show that even relatively short periods of mindfulness can be helpful. It's very important to consistently get restful sleep. Getting consistent sleep is probably one of the single most underrated aspects of mental health. There are loads of studies that demonstrate the negative impact of sleep deprivation on both physical and mental health. This is something Winston Churchill also knew over 80 years ago when he was Prime Minister of England and oversaw their military. At the time, he coined the famous phrase, "Fatigue makes cowards of us all," which was a commentary on why he would never let his troops go into battle without a good night's sleep. Although you may not be preparing for battle, being fatigued leads to greater susceptibility to other issues. In a 2020 study by Dr. Marcus Harrington and colleagues, the researchers found that being sleep deprived can lead to a 50% increase in unwanted negative thoughts. Given that experiencing a recurrence of unwanted thoughts is a core component of dealing with a traumatic incident, it's important to sleep consistently or to increase your psychological immunity towards the impact of a potentially traumatic event. This is particularly important and challenging for people such as first responders who often work shifts which oscillate between working days and nights. So it's important to aim for 8 hours of sleep whenever it's time for you to rest. And remember, even lying down or relaxing during that time counts, as you're at least entering into level 1 and possibly level 2 sleep. So there's some gain to be had. For my fourth step, it's very important to lock down healthy living habits after being involved in a traumatic incident. Following a traumatic event, the body's likely contending with high levels of cortisol, which is the main stress hormone, and adrenaline, as this is a natural physiological response to feeling threatened. So at this time, very important to focus on healthy living habits to help you normalize your body and mind. A few important healthy living habits to prioritize, besides sleep, include drinking water regularly, as your body's 60% water and you want to avoid additional stress on the body, such as being dehydrated or promoting further inflammation, which is another stress response. You want to eat regular healthy meals, even if your appetite's poor. You want to eat small meals or snacks, so at least you have consistent fuel for energy. You are going to want to exercise regularly. Physical and mental health benefits of exercise are almost endless. Even if you simply prioritize moving and avoid being sedentary, you want to avoid alcohol and drug use, as the goal at this time is to normalize the body as opposed to further altering your body's biochemistry as a short-term solution to escape feelings of distress. And you also want to manage stress well. The stress on top of any pre-existing problem makes it worse. So you always want to strive to keep stress to a minimum. For my fifth step, the memories from the traumatic incident have become sticky and bothersome. Now's the time to allow yourself to think about or process them. Once fearful memories become encoded in long-term memory, they can become difficult to shake. And there's a reason for this. One of the mind's most important jobs is to keep you safe. So essentially, the mind doesn't want to forget fearful memories because it wants you to avoid those situations in the future. Living in a state of fear is uncomfortable, and it's not the most adaptive way to cope. So it's important to be able to remove the fear from the memory so it's easier for the mind to store it. And once this happens, the brain typically doesn't feel the need to continue to recall it. So if you've been involved in a traumatic incident, I encourage you to set aside a few minutes to allow yourself to think about the event from start to finish. When doing this, I suggest that you review the memory from a third-person perspective. In a 2019 study by Dr. Peggy St. Jacques, she found that when people see their memories from a first-person perspective, it makes them stronger and more vivid. However, when people review their memories from a third-person or an observer perspective, this could also be known as taking a fly-on-the-wall approach, helps to make memories weaker. When you're finished reviewing your memories, also known as processing, I'd suggest rating how much distress you experience by rating on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 equals no distress, 5 is moderate distress, and 10 is extreme distress. This is known as a subjective unit of distress scale, or SUDS rating. Ideally, your distress rating should be a 5 or less if you're going to process this incident yourself. If rating is higher than that, I highly suggest working with a psychotherapist or a psychologist who's experienced in treating traumatic incidents, so you aren't left to cope with high levels of distress on your own. For my sixth and final step, it's important to change the channel in your mind, so to speak, after taking time to process a traumatic incident. Once you begin processing a traumatic incident, it can be difficult to stop, as your mind essentially wants to continue addressing it. However, processing memories is best done in relatively short spurts, as continuing to go over the incident repeatedly for an extended period of time will likely make it worse. So when you finish processing a memory, it's important to engage in a task that's cognitively demanding to help change the channel in your mind, just like I mentioned in step 1. In this particular case, one of the best ways to do this is to engage in a conversation with someone about a different topic. Or if you're by yourself, engage in a cognitively demanding task, such as playing a computer game. Even then, it's still likely you're going to be tempted to go back to the incident and continue processing it. At this point, it's best to set a time in the future when you can process the incident and return to whatever task you're focusing on. Remember, slow and steady wins the race when it comes to successfully managing a traumatic incident. So to provide a quick recap. First, it's important to do something cognitively demanding after being involved in a traumatic incident, such as play a computer game that requires focus and speed. For the 6 hours following a distressing incident, the goal is to avoid focusing on the incident and do something cognitively demanding to help interfere with how the bad memories are being stored in long-term memory. Second, incorporate mindfulness in your daily routine. It can be a helpful tool to help cope with a traumatic event, and can also help with prevention should you ever become involved in a traumatic incident. For my third step, it's important to get consistent restful sleep. If you're deprived of sleep and you become involved in a potentially traumatic incident, it's a 50% likelihood that you'll struggle with unwanted negative thoughts, so it's crucial to prioritize sleep. Fourth, prioritize healthy living habits following a traumatic incident. During this time, it's important to stabilize both the body and the mind, so be sure to engage in healthy living habits such as prioritizing sleep, drinking water regularly, eating consistent healthy meals, exercising regularly, and avoiding alcohol and drug use. Fifth, you find the incident continues to bother you after a few days, take time to process it. This involves going over the incident from start to finish in your mind. When doing this, it can be helpful to use an observer perspective to help the memory feel less intense. If you find reviewing the incident in your mind to be too distressing, I encourage you to work with a psychotherapist or psychologist. For my sixth and final step, if you're processing a traumatic incident or stuck in a pattern of worry, it's important to have a strategy to change the channel in your mind. Doing something cognitively demanding, such as having a conversation with a different person about a different topic, or playing a game that requires speed, focus, or problem-solving ability can be helpful. So I hope you found these steps helpful. If you'd like to learn more about coping with a traumatic incident, please contact us at Sullivan Associates Clinical Psychology. If you enjoyed the video, like it, share it, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.